So all the great things that soil does, it's a living organism, and we also have to make contact with it. And so one of the ways we do that is to get people to drop off their food scraps so they can start thinking about, making compost, that the food they grow actually has a life after they've, chopped off the ends of the broccoli spears or pulled off the stems off a tomato,
So we're in Los Angeles, California today, and I'm out to visit with the nonprofit LA Compost. We're gonna go ask them some questions about how they got community composting set up in the city of Los Angeles. There's gotta be a lot of food scraps here.
I like composting.
You like composting?
Yeah.
This is our first time actually.
First time, really?
First time at this location. We've composted for a long time, but we just moved into town.
I've been composting for a few years. Used to work for a compost company, so we just moved to LA and definitely needed to find a place that we can continue doing this. So I've been doing it for a while. I'm happy to have found this.
How did you find out about LA Compost?
Lots of online research, trying to figure out where in LA I could put my food scraps, and this was one of the only places that I could find, and it's close to home, so it's great.
Yeah.
So you guys really sought it out as a purposefully versus just finding it, right?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to
definitely.
find something.
Yeah.
Not throw my food in the trash.
We do this every Sunday. We do some of our food scraps at home, but our worm bin isn't big enough to handle all of it. And then we also like to take it for our neighbors so that they can, just to make it more efficient, like we're not all driving down here. I grew up composting. It was something I wanted to hand down. We did it at home, but that's really hard to do in a small rental.
Right.
Though we do a little bit. So it's great to be able to come here and do it. So what happens to the food scraps after they're here, Z?
They go to the worms and that is the worm poop.
Yeah.
Okay, I can no longer guarantee that there are garlic chives in there.
Yeah.
And then just giving away this kind of
So LA Compost mission, as far as I know, is to calculate how much compost is gathered so that we will get municipal compost. That this is a great service, which is why I started composting with LA Compost. I mean, it started out, I was doing it at this drop-off and that at a church in Highland Park. And then I got this code to this garden, which not everyone has. And I started dropping off here, and then it's just gotten bigger and bigger. So now they started doing this drop-off point instead because the garden compost was getting overwhelmed. And it's been a really valuable experience. I hung out enough around there and volunteered enough that I got my own plot. It's a real treat. It feels really good to cut down on your waste. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just and to know that when I forget about an avocado, it's not going in the trash. It's going back to new life. It's very special.
I'm Mark from LA Compost. I'm the Farmers Market Manager.
So Mark, thank you very much for joining us here on the Urban Gardener to talk about your organization, LA Compost and community composting. I find it such a fascinating thing. Could you tell us and the audience a little bit more about what the mission of LA Compost is?
So the mission is very basic. It's actually to get the people of LA, the citizens, of LA County, not just the city, but to actually come in contact with their soil again. To just kind of think about the soil as a living organism, something that they're interacting with. Hopefully more often than once a day, but just also how it feeds them, how it interacts with them, how it actually sequesters carbon for them. So all the great things that soil does. It's a living organism, and we also have to make contact with it. And so one of the ways we do that is to get people to drop off their food scraps so they can start thinking about making compost, that the food they grow actually has a life after they've chopped off the ends of the broccoli spears or pulled off the stems off a tomato. All those things you kind of like, there is a life after this piece, right? And a little bit of browning, or if it's just too rotten to eat, it doesn't mean it's like goes to the trash, right? So we can bring that back in, we can reinvigorate the soil, we can actually make LA healthier. Definitely with LA, there's lots of carbon in the air, there's lots of particles that we need to get rid of. So all that stuff can kind of help be pulled into the soil, and then the microbes and all that stuff can help break it down for us.
And it really does kind of get started down at a community level though too, doesn't it?
So most of our compost collections actually started 3 years ago, May. And we started at a community, it was at a farmer's market. And so it was just the people who just came through. We didn't even do any advertising. It was just the people who showed up and they said, what are you doing? And so it started off, we had 10 people the first week, I think. And we did like 100 pounds. And then we had like the next week it was like 12 people. Then it was like 18 people, and it was like 20 people. So it was really slow to grow the first 4 or 5 months, but it was no advertising, just word of mouth. People who are just coming by. I would say most people drop off are actually people who live in apartments. They don't have the space to compost. They really want to do something like with their food scraps. They know that throwing them in the trash is bad. It creates methane gas and it's bad for the whole planet. But they have nothing else to do with it, right? Their space is too small. Even for a worm composter, it's too small. And so they're like, and even people I know who've composted in the past have come and told me like, you know what, I just can't do it. It gets smelly, I get bite and whatever, they're just not into it, right? It takes that little bit of extra effort, and they're just not, but they're like so happy that we're doing this for, there's someplace they can drop it off. And we also had the reverse happen, where people who were composting with us, they found out about us, they're composting with us, they did it for a year, and they're like, I want to do this at home. And I've started at least 5 people having their own little worm bins, even in their apartments, or like on the balcony of their apartments. And they're growing. This one person's like, hey, I have so much worm compost, but I only have like an apartment. What do I do with the rest of the vermiculture? And I'm just like, give it to your friends. And like, well, my friends, I gave it to all. And I said, bring it to me. And I said, we'll throw it into our compost bins. The gardeners will use it. There's no shortage of need for the compost, right?
Exactly. Especially in an LA area like this, where there's just so many people and so much going on.
The city just gave us a space at Griffith Park. And so that's going to be our next place we're going to actually expand to. So we can start the composting there.
So there is already some sort of relationship and all of that sort of thing within the organization, and working with the city on that already.
Yeah, we're working with the city, we're working with the mayor's office. They actually came in, they blocked this street off, and they put up signs to make sure that no one was parking here on Sunday, so we'd have the space. Yeah, so we have a really close relationship with both the council members and the mayor's office.
Excellent.
And they actually want us to do even more than we're actually capable of. They want us to be at every park and every farmer's market we can be. It's just kind of like, we need to make sure we're doing it well, right? Not just like spread out really fast and then kind of like, oh my gosh, we're out of control, but kind of like move in a very thoughtful, just like compost. You have to kind of take the time, and you got to move, and you got to make sure it's going to work well. We don't want to make sloppy compost, right?
Right. And where and what goes on with those food scraps next?
So we'll leave here today, and we actually take 2 runs because the van can't hold everything in one shot. So we go at around noon, and I go again at 2:30. Take the final, and we take it to it currently, since the Debs Park situation is full, Ernest Debs Park. We're working in this church called Hillside Community Church of LA, and they gave us a big space to do that. So we've been there for 4 weeks. We'll be there probably for 4 weeks more before we move to our final site of Griffith Park. And so today I just drop everything off. So I'm already at my 8-hour day, usually by that point, clean up. So then on Tuesday, we have 2 more staff members, so it's 3 of us, and usually 1 or 2 volunteers, and that's when we'll go. We have mulch dropped off from a couple of local tree trimmers. So they're dropping off their mulch. It means it also doesn't go to the dump or to any kind of waste site. We lay the layer of mulch. We lay usually about 15 to 20 bins out, and so it's about a 10-foot by 4-foot windrow that we're creating, and then we'll build about 4 layers, like lasagna style. So it's the mulch, it's the food scraps, it's more mulch, more food scraps, more mulch, more food scraps. And usually also we'll be working now with a lumber mill called Angel City Lumber. And so we're actually taking sawdust from them, and so every layer will also have a really thin layer of sawdust, about an inch, just to, it actually helps create a little grittiness to the compost.
Oh, excellent.
And so it actually also adds that last organic material, but it's super dry and super carbon rich and not nitrogen rich, so we have to kind of use it very sparingly.
All right, and so then you're just turning that every now and then, and like I said,
so yeah,
how long
usually,
does it take about to?
So we then have some other volunteers who come on Thursday, and they'll actually once again turn it. Or so the next week we go back, we do the first turn, and then it'll usually sit for a couple of weeks, and then we'll do another turn, but after a month. And it usually takes, because we can't turn every week, we don't have enough volunteers, we don't have just time. It usually takes about 3 to 4 months before we can actually make the final product. And then we'll have a sifting day, and we'll just do we'll do 20 bins, and we'll just get like 10 yards of compost, and then we'll just use that for a couple of weeks, and then we'll just do it again. And so we kind of knock down a big pile at one time. At the market today, there's 4 or 5 people came and said, hey, can I just have 1 cubic foot of compost? And we sell that, and that's at $20. And people, they like the fact that they have been dropping off for a year. They know this is their own food scraps, as long as everybody else is coming back to them. So people like that. And we're also make that like on a Thursday, and we sell it on a Sunday. So it still is a live compost. It's not unlike sometimes you go to the store and the compost is dry and hard, and it's because they made it and then they shipped it, and it's been months, and so all the bacteria mostly have died off. So this compost still, just because you can still see it's slightly moist, still has the bacteria, still has a lot of the, microorganisms still alive in it. So when you put that into your soil, you're actually getting, those will start to just reproduce, and the organic material you're adding to the soil by adding compost, feeds them, and that feeds the nutrients for your plants, And then all the microorganisms will just kind of start binding to your roots, and that helps your plants take in the nutrients even faster.
So it's kind of really just kind of continuing the cycle then too. So you're collecting the food scraps from folks, and then they're coming back and being able to get the soil to create more food scraps.
Yes, right. And they're like the good things they're doing now coming back to help them be healthier too, right? So then they're getting good quality nutrients, and the bacteria break down all those things, and just even some of the metals and the kind of hazardous stuff gets actually taken broken down.
Yeah, okay, then that makes me wonder, question about what you're taking in. So I'm sure there's got to be things that that you're not, that you don't take for the compost, right?
Yes.
And I'm sure that you probably run into people trying to give it to you too, right?
Yes.
So are there like limitations to the certain types of things you can accept for your compost?
Yeah, and so what I tell people, especially when the first time somebody comes in, they look like they're kind of dazed and looking around like what to do. And so we tell them you just bring your compost in, you weigh it first, and you drop it off in any of the bins we set up. And our basic rules are like no meats, no dairies, no oils. And we also don't take any of the bioplastics. Bioplastics, they're all listed as they will break down in a composter, but most of those require an industrial compost. It needs to be the temperature needs to be heated a lot more than the 150s, 160s we'll get in a windrow. And it's just, even if it does look like it's broken down, when we actually look at the stuff under a microscope, we see these little tiny green beads everywhere. And so we know it's not completely breaking down. So even if it is a starch-made material, we prefer that one to an industrial composter. So we don't take those. And the same thing. So we don't take any of the meats. Even though they are organic and they will break down, they just bring in a lot more cockroaches and rats and other things we don't really, and especially the sites we have, a lot of sites are either exposed, like at the church or at Griffith Park. There's actually a hiking trail right down the middle of our compost site. So that's not something we want, we have to kind of make the place look nice. And so it's kind of more of our model. We have big regional hubs, like we're working on like the Debs Park or the Hillside, the Griffith Parks. But then we also have a lot of community smaller hubs. So it's either this place is the community garden at in Elysian Valley.
Yeah.
And this is one we started, but it's really the gardeners now who actually do the composting. They do the ones that turning. It's a lot of the people from the nearby neighborhood will bring their food scraps, but then the gardeners get the benefits of having all this great compost, right?
Yeah.
And so all their gardens will grow and be wonderful. And then we also work at very local individual sites. And so we're working with a couple of different places in South Central LA right now, and it's called, and there's just a food cultivator, kind of program. If you're growing things in your backyard, then you could also have a composter or work with somebody who's in your area, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you don't have one, but your neighbor does, kind of thing. So you provide them food scraps, but you also maybe help them turn the compost. You show up once in a while and water it, or help them sift it down, and then split the final product. So we want to get everybody kind of connected to the soil, to the food scraps. Even if you're in an apartment, right? There's always a place to volunteer. There's always maybe a community garden that could use your help for a day, kind of thing.
Yeah. So also, like, I guess if you live in an apartment as well, I hear a lot of people who talk about how they can't grow a garden, they don't have the space to grow a garden and all of that. Well, you can contribute anyways. You can bring your food scraps down to LA Compost, and you can turn that into soil and allow for others to be able to grow food themselves and all of that. I want to thank you, Mark, for joining us here on The Urban Gardener, answering some of our questions about community composting here with the organization LA Compost. And again, everybody, I want to thank you all for joining us here for this video. And if you can, go and check out LA Compost and what they've got going on. And maybe there's something within their organization that you can find to be able to work out maybe a program of the same sort in your community as well. So again, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Hit that like button, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything at all, please get down in the comments section and let us know. And if you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, please get down there and hit that subscribe button. Follow along with more garden adventures here on The Urban Gardener. And we'll see all of you on the next episode. And what I'm doing with my channel is just kind of trying to reach out, do some features, and see some of these things that are going on out there, like LA Compost, which I just find completely fascinating. What I was talking about with one of your volunteers earlier was that years ago, here I am, I'm in my community garden, we're doing all this stuff, and I'm just really getting into gardening at this time. You know what I mean? And I'm really into it. And here I'm thinking like, oh, we're all doing this gardening and all this, and I know that we've got all these scraps of things that are just, and we're setting up this little compost thing, and in my mind I'm thinking, community composting, what is it? This is an idea. We should be doing this. Here, I'm thinking I'm the guy who's got this great idea, and there's people like yourselves and your organization out there already doing that work, finding that sort of stuff in these communities down here in Los Angeles, which is really great.
Yes.